So now we have a series of kind of side issues, like non-X-Men related stuff with the X-Men starring in it. The first one is King Size Marvel Team Up Annual Number 1. Spider-Man and the X-Men and the Lords of Light and Darkness. So we start off, there's this area called the Nest, and it's got a bunch of robots and stuff in it, and there's some shenanigans going on with this group of people that are just kind of introducing themselves and talking, and then there's an explosion. Meanwhile, a senator is taking some people to go visit the Nest and see what's going on, which includes Professor X and the X-Men. Originally, it was supposed to be Reed Richards, and there's like a point of contention there, but like whatever. Also, Peter Parker's there, obviously, because this is a Spider-Man co-op. But so as the plane gets close, they get assaulted by these like robots we saw earlier and attack. So then the X-Men have to start fighting them off. Peter Parker changes in Spider-Man, and we just get a big battle in the sky for a while with them killing the robots. And eventually, the plane sort of crashes, sort of lands safely. The senator and these Russian guys have like a disagreement about who's in charge of causing what problems, with the senator just being like racist towards mutants and stuff. But the Russian guy's like, no, there's a thing over there. That's the Nest. And then he gives them something, this like radiation spray, so they can be protected or whatever. Finally, Nightcrawler shows up. Because the whole time they're fighting in the sky and stuff, he was like not around. But now he's back. He was supposed to be there the whole time. Spider-Man is like, oh, hey, what's up? And, you know, some of the X-Men know Spider-Man, some don't. Nightcrawler kind of diffuses tensions, and Storm and Banshee go through this, like, radiation shield where they are attacked and collapse, and we see the shadow of two figures. The first figure is Yama Dharma, and the second one is something Night Queen. It's, Kali. That's right, Kali. And she's got some sort of thing where she, like, knocks people out. So between the two of them, the X-Men and Spider-Man get a couple good punches, and then they all get knocked out, and then they're being held prisoner, and Phoenix is being spoken to by these people who declare to be gods, right? So it's all the people who are in the space, or in the Nest earlier. With the radiation explosion, it transformed them into, like, their preferred deities. So we got, like, Brahma, Kali, Mara, Yama, Agni, Vishnu, Shiva, right? No Jesus, unfortunately. There's no Christians among this bunch. But the X-Men and Spider-Man are able to escape in time to go kind of like meet up with Jean. And essentially these gods are like, they're going to explode, or they need lots of matter or something. So they're going to destroy the planet and go make a new planet. And then the X-Men end up stopping them by just fighting them real good. And then they're about to like explode anyway and destroy the planet when Jean has them all like hold hands in a circle with like all the X-Men. And then they transfer powers, and then like people like, it's a lot of like bullshit kind of stuff, Cyclops, and they like combine forces, and with the power of friendship they're able to launch like the gods into space, where they start a new solar system, and then everyone on Earth is okay. We then continue right into Marvel Team Up number 53, which starts with the Hulk and some of their shenanigans that are unimportant to the X-Men, so who cares. And we got Spider-Man, and is riding on the front of this like spaceship thing they got from their previous mission. While Cyclops is flying it, and everyone's just kind of hanging out talking about stuff, and then they get attacked because they're in a UFO and restricted area, and they fight off these like funny flying things and these missiles, and then Banshee ends up rescuing Spider-Man right before he crashes into some craggy rocks. They see that Hulk is fighting something, and that the goal of like whatever organization this is to kill the Hulk and Bruce Banner. So the rest of the X-Men take Professor X onward home, and then the Banshee flies with Spider-Man to go help the Hulk. And he gets tired because he's old, but he's able to get him far enough where Spider-Man's able to use some spider web and stuff, and then they land safely. At that point, Banshee leaves, and I stopped talking about this issue. But no worries, the tale continues as the X-Men continue to fly back to New York, and they're just hanging out, chilling when they get attacked by Sunstroke. Who's Sunstroke? Who cares? He's like a West Coast Avengers villain. I'm never going to see him again. So he shoots like sun rays or something, and he knocks Professor X out, and then he knocks Jean out before Cyclops hits him, and Storm fights, but he knocks Storm out. Nightcrawler saves Storm and is like, oh, that's weird. Something's weird about all this. And then Colossus goes to throw Wolverine at Sunstroke, but then he creates a brilliant light, and Cyclops misthrows him into like some rocks, which start to like eat him up. At that point, Banshee shows up, having had dropped Spider-Man off before, and he goes brah, and like really messes up Sunstroke before Sunstroke gets saved by disappearing into the ground. And the X-Men are cutting for him for a little bit, but then Cyclops says, "Hey, leave that jabroni alone. We're headed home." And then Professor X is like, "Oh, I'm fine. We just got to make sure Jean's okay." After the X-Men leave, we see that this cactus and this Gila monster and this Mesa character are all part of this team that is fighting the West Coast Avengers League or something. Who cares? So next up, we got a little story in a what is it called? I don't know what this is called. It's not like an issue. It's called Wolverine Battles the Incredible Hulk. It's just a retelling, colorized version of those 2 issues of the Hulk. But it has a little side story that wasn't around before, so that's what we're going to talk about. So Wolverine's all sadapotamous about having to deal with Cyclops and his bullshit. So he goes on like a little trip to some fancy bar where he's going to like pick up on girls, but he's like an asshole, so that doesn't work too well. But then Hercules shows up, and the girls are all over him, and he taunts him, and then him and Hercules fight, and they have a good old fight, and they go back and forth and back and forth. But then they're like wrecking this place while they're fighting, and eventually they come to like an accord where they both like, that was pretty good, that was pretty fun times, man, so we can be friends, so let's work together and get these ladies. And they look around and the whole bar is destroyed and there's no ladies, and then they're sad. We take quite the divergence here, but we get introduced to Captain Britain around this time as he teams up with Spider-Man. We get his background, and Captain Britain is not going to be relevant for the X-Men stories for a while, but he's definitely an X-Men character that has relevance as he leads Excalibur for quite some time, and his sister is Psylocke. That's a whole other story. We'll get around to it. So Spider-Man's in England, just doing England shit, and he goes to talk to a professor that he's there with, and he meets Brian Braddock, who's Captain Britain, and they have a nice conversation. Then we find out that Arcade is going to be involved in this storyline. Brian goes out with... Oh, no, wait. I think they're in New York, because Brian goes out with, like, MJ and her friends to party up being in America. Yeah, they're definitely in America. I apologize. And then he sees Spider-Man... Or Peter Parker comes to, like, wake him up, but then there's, like, an alarm or something. So he changes to Spider-Man, and Brian, like, wakes up, sees Spider-Man leaving the room, is like, I thought Peter was just here. And he taps an amulet on his chest and becomes Captain Britain. Of course, this is how 90% of Spider-Man's battles go with other heroes, is miscommunication and misunderstanding. So they fight. Spider-Man eventually wins because it's a Spider-Man book, even though it's a Marvel team-up. And once they have the conversation, Brian Braddock talks about how he used to work for this company and that they were trying to kill him to like cover up this thing, and he fell off like a cliff and thought he was going to die, but then he hit this like ring of stones, like a Stonehenge kind of thing, and he ends up talking to these 2 like British like old-timey values or whatever. I don't know if it named them per se, but they judge his immortal soul to see if he should be condemned or not. So they give him he can choose between a sword and an amulet for ultimate power, and he chooses the amulet because he's a scholar and he wants to help his friends or something, and that gives him the ability to turn into Captain Britain. And so after he recalls this story with Spider-Man, they go and they're trying to meet up with like a NYPD lady, but right before they do, Arcade shows up with his dump truck of stealing heroes and captures them. The follow-up in issue 66 of the Marvel team-up, Spider-Man and Captain Britain, there's not much that really happens. They wake up, they're in these pinballs, they're in Arcade's trap, and then the Arcade's trap happens. Good old Mortar World. They bounce around in like a pinball machine. They break out of that. Then there's a spike ball. They break out of that. They fall down this tunnel and end up in different areas where they have to like rescue somebody. And there's like mirrors, and then there's like the mirrors produce like other versions of Captain Britain for him to fight. And while Spider-Man's fighting like toys in another room, it's very like arcade style stuff. We'll get like an X-Men issue that kind of really focuses on this at some point. So eventually Captain Britain and Spider-Man are able to... So Captain Britain gets like drowned first. He gets saved. And eventually this girl, like Captain Britain's lady friend, they rescue her, and then there's gas, but then they bust through to the escape through out of Arcade's like ridiculous thing, and the police come and get them, and hooray! And then Arcade's like, someone's like, oh no, they completely destroyed Murder World, what can we do? And then Arcade is always happy because he gets to build another one. So Arcade being Arcade. We continue with an actual issue of Classic X-Men, Classic X-Men number 16, which is regular Uncanny X-Men number 109. Okay. So this issue, everyone's back. Everyone's kind of getting used to like chilling out and what's going on after that. Sean makes a move on Moira immediately. Aurora goes up to her room and gets naked, and Jean has to go talk with her parents. We get a little recap of what happened after they cured the Imcron crystal. The guard, or the what do you call them? The Imperial Guard. Yeah, I think that's what they're called. They wanted to fight and kill the X-Men because that was the last order they got from the Emperor. But then Lilandra stops him and says, "I'm the Empress now." And then like the guy is like, "Well, no, I mean, we know that he's mad and you were right, but you still started a rebellion, so it's going to take a minute before you get crowned." Then Corsair makes Jean promise that she won't tell Scott that he's her dad. Aurora hears this, so she knows that, and they have a little conversation about that. Jean goes off to talk to her parents about all the crazy shit that's been going on, and Banshee takes Moira to set up like a picnic to go do that. Meanwhile, in Canada, I forget what this guy's name is. Max something. He's the guy who creates Alpha Flight, which is like the Canadian Avengers essentially, and he's Weapon Alpha, I think, or Weapon H or something like that. Anyway, he's looking up Wolverine stuff, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna go get Wolverine back," and he heads off. Then we get Lilandra wandering around on Earth, being like, "These peasants with their like, they don't have any technology. I can't believe they actually sleep in like a bed." And then, "Oh, the shower's mechanical, Lord." And then her and Xavier could get some smooches. Speaking of smooches, Kurt calls up his lady friend Amanda and plans a date with her, and he goes to invite Colossus to come with them because she's got a friend. But Peter's already going to go on this picnic with Moira and Sean. Nightcrawler finds Cyclops just looking at Jean and her parents while she's trying to explain everything to him and being sad, and he gives him some good advice. This is like the first time Nightcrawler does this, as far as I recall. So he does this a lot. He does love advising. He's like very good at like helping people get over stuff, and he's very well adapted to like all the trauma he's gone through. Sean invites them both out. Cyclops is like, "Nah, I got to think about stuff," and Nightcrawler's like, "No, I got a date." And then right before they go on the picnic, Wolverine shows up with this costume and is like, "Hey, I'm going to go hunting. I'm going to go with you guys." And then I'm going to go do that. And then Aurora's like, "I can't believe you kill animals for sport." And the Wolverine's like, "I'm not killing them. That's too easy. I'm just going to go sneak up on him and touch him in the back." And she's like, "I apologize." And he's like, "Whatever, you're all judging me all the time." So he's out doing that, and he's about to accomplish his goal when Weapon Alpha, it's James McDonald Hudson, James Hudson, shows up with his like Alpha suit, and then they start fighting. We get a nice couple of pages of that, and then we get Peter and Aurora just talking about life in like Russia, and while Moira and Sean are like flirting and playing around in the water, and Wolverine comes smashing in, followed by Weapon Alpha, and Colossus knocks him into a tree, and then Storm just zaps him, and then he zaps back, and he ends up like pinging off Colossus and hitting Moira on the side of the head, which makes Banshee go nuts, and he like hits him so hard and is about to like really wreck shop with him when Hudson just like disappears. Banshee and Storm head back. Moira's okay, but she needs some medical attention, so they go, and then Wolverine apologizes for involving them in like his crazy stuff. We then go up into like the sky, and like 500 miles away or something, where we learn that the suit that McDonald has lets him, he can like not be affected by the gravitational turn of the Earth, so he moved like really fast away, and then he goes back to Canada to be with his wife, and he feels really bad because he might have killed that girl, and he's like out of control, and he didn't, like, being a superhero is a lot harder than he thought it was going to be, and she comforts him. So for the B story, we go back in time. We're following somebody on a motorcycle being chased by police, and then somewhere else we see Sean, when he's much younger, being accosted by the English police, because he's Irish, and like, oh, they had the troubles and whatnot. So then the lady like rolls up, knocks the police off, and then Banshee, or Sean at the time, hops onto the back of the motorcycle. The police give chase. Eventually they shoot out one of the tires, and the motorcycle crashes into the water, and at the last second before the motorcyclist and Sean are about to fall in the water, he grabs her. It's a her. He grabs her and flies off to Cassidy Keep using his Banshee power. She then puts him off and yells at him. When we find out this is Maeve O'Rourke, who's the mother of Teresa O'Rourke, Banshee's future daughter, that has come up in these reviews as part of the alternative timeline ones, the What If. But this is all like new stuff, right? So this is stuff that will not come. I don't think Teresa really shows up till much, much, much later. Okay. So then brings him back, he introduces him to Tom, and then Tom and Sean both have like a crush on Maeve, and so they both like go out with her and date her. But clearly, in the panels, Maeve and Sean are much more like they get along much better, while Maeve is like friend zoning Tom real hard. So Sean is about to go on like some university ball with Maeve when he's riding his motorcycle and gets knocked off by the same policeman from earlier. He comes in, he's all battered and beatered, and he like collapses, and he's like, Tom, promise me you'll go take Maeve to this ball. So, I promised her. And so while Tom's there, he admits that Sean wanted to come, but that he got hurt really bad and he couldn't make it. And she's like, thank you so much for thinking of me over yourself. You're a really good friend. Bro, friend zone. Tough luck, mate. So Uncanny X-Men number 110 didn't get a classic remake, and the reason why is it's just like a side story. It's not really that relevant to the overall thing. I feel like that's not wholly true, to be completely honest, though. Generally when these things don't get remade, that's why, but this pretty much has Jean joining the X-Men, which I guess she was kind of part of them before, but like officially, because before she was like in the X-Men, and then she was taking time off, and then she was just kind of hanging out and stuff was happening. But the issue opens up with the X-Men taking, I guess Moira McTaggart's headed back to Scotland and her research center, where Alex, James, and Lorna are at, but they're having a baseball game to celebrate, and so of course powers get used, and Wolverine and Colossus get into like a little frumpus. Moira heads out after they're having a little picnic to get like the phone guy because the phone system went down, and he of course is a bad guy who shoots her with like a tranquilizing dart. He then goes, and his name is Warhawk, and he's been reconstructed, kind of like his whole body's like metal, kind of like Colossus when he's in his form, but not as good. And he sees the X-Men playing ball, and then he gets a call from like his master. He then sneaks up on Jean and Professor X, and Jean and Professor X are talking about how she needs more training, even though she has all this power and all this other stuff's going on. She's lacking in her ability to fight, and like the more you kind of let it go, the more you let it go. But they get jumped by this guy and both get shot with tranquilizer, and Jean actually takes 2 shots, so good for her. Meanwhile, the X-Men are in not the war room, the danger room, practicing and training when they realize that the whole thing's going off and that someone's controlling it. They try to emergency stop it, but that doesn't work, and so Nightcrawler has to grab Wolverine and teleport out. But at this point, Nightcrawler's not good enough with his abilities, so when he does stuff like that, he kind of like passes out, and Wolverine's also kind of knocked out. Storm gets caught in like a thing, but she's able to break out with the help of Banshee and Cyclops. And then people are, Banshee gets kind of knocked out, Colossus gets stuck. Wolverine finally wakes up on the outside of the danger room. He claws the danger room thing open so that it shuts down, and then he's going to like open the door, and Warhawk shows up. And then they go back and forth, and they're fighting. And looks like Warhawk, or not, is it Warhawk? Yeah, Warhawk has kind of like the upper hand, but then the door bursts open, and the rest of the X-Men who are well, they come out. And then Warhawk's like, oh no, I'm going to use this thing to release a gas and knock all of them out. But what, bro? Nightcrawler got it, so now he's fucked. So then Colossus just knocks him the fuck out. They then turn him into the police, and the police chief is like, hey, supposedly this guy is undefeatable or unstoppable, so how did a bunch of kids at the school stop him? And they're just like, luck? And he's like, all right. He wanders off, and the Professor X is like, or Aurora's like, hey, he seems kind of like concerned, and Professor X is like, oh yeah, we have a lot of shenanigans here, and we can't tell him what's going on, so he's very suspicious. They then talk about how Warhawk must have been led by somebody else, and then this is where Jean officially decides she's going to join the X-Men and train and everything, and everyone cheers and is super excited that Phoenix is now officially part of the Uncanny X-Men again. So we got a 2-parter here with the Marvel team up to kind of wrap up this intermediary portion of the Phoenix saga, where we just kind of get like a bunch of side tales that occur like after the big event and then before like the secondary events. And it's the return of our best friend forever, the Pharaoh, the living Pharaoh. What an asshole. So we are taken to Scotland, where Lorna and Alex are having a nice walk on by the research center that they are now hanging out at with Moira and Jamie. We're both off in Edinburgh, I don't know, getting drunk or something. They get attacked by the living Pharaoh's men. They fight back. Lorna gets knocked into the water, and Alex gets caught up with some sort of thing. So heading all the way back to New York, obviously, because it's a Marvel team up. Spider-Man. Peter Parker's chilling. He's doing like research late in the evening, and he sees some Pharaoh guys, and he gets caught in his own web because he's a dumbass. Back to Scotland. Lorna Dane has recovered and from the water. She calls. No one in the X-Men's around, so she calls the Beast. Tells him all this stuff. The Beast talks to Thor for a minute, and then he bounces out. Spider-Man sees him bouncing out, and we follow him for a little bit as he sees Havoc being put in an ambulance. So somehow, instantaneously, these guys flew from Scotland to New York and then landed in like a park and put Havoc, strapped him down in like a gunny or whatever it's called, or a gurney, and are putting him in an ambulance. Spider-Man shows up, beats the shit out of him, releases Havoc, who just blasts the fuck out of him. But then they get attacked by Dun Dun Dun, the living Pharaoh, who then beats the shit out of Spider-Man. Havoc and him go at it, but then Havoc gets blindsided by a guy who snuck up behind him and captures him. They throw him back in their little coffin thingy, if you remember, all the way back, like Uncanny X-Men like 60 or 58 or something like that, when Alex came before. So if they close him off, then the living Pharaoh becomes the living monolith, which is super big and tough and whatever. It says it's 56. I put it in my notes. So all the way back then. So they're putting him in. Havoc's trying to like push back. Spider-Man shows up. They fight. And then the living Pharaoh shows up. Him and Spider-Man and living Pharaoh start fighting, and Spider-Man beats the shit out of him. Unfortunately, he knocks the living Pharaoh onto the case that Havoc is trying to release himself from to not be closed, which causes it to close, which causes living Pharaoh to become the living monolith. Part 2 of this, which is a Marvel team up number 70. It doesn't really involve Alex that much at all, or Lorna, or any X-Men, to be completely honest. It's pretty much just a big fight. The whole issue is just a fight between Spider-Man and the living monolith, and Thor jumps in. So it's pretty much just Spider-Man, Thor team up. They fight. They're having a hard time. Finally, Spider-Man's like, oh, wait, I got an idea. So he sneaks back into, like, living Pharaoh's there, releases Havoc. Havoc blasts off a bunch of his, like, extra load. And then Thor beats the shit out of living Pharaoh, and then they all congratulate each other, and Spider-Man's like, well, he's probably dead. And Havoc's like, I wouldn't count on it because we've killed him once before. And he's like, oh no, Lorna, I gotta get back to Scotland. And then Thor's like, I'll take you. The end. So that's the end of the intermediate period of the Phoenix Saga arc. So go ahead and like, share, subscribe, and comment. It was interesting, a lot of good stuff going on, and kind of just like building up for like the final kind of stretch, and then after that, we probably get to like the Dark Phoenix stuff, if I remember correctly. But yeah, there you go. Cool. So catch y'all later.